All right, good evening. 7:02 this evening, we will call the Committee to Infrastructure to order. Would the clerk be so kind as to call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mark S. Cookson.
I am
Chair.
present.
Alderman David Shoneman. Here. Alderman Sean McGinnis, I am here. Alderman Richard Dowd. Present. And Alderman Tom Lopez.
I'm here.
Also in attendance, we have Director Marchant.
Director Marchant.
And we'll begin with public comment. Mr. Cutter, would you like to join us this evening? Excellent. Name and address for the record and your comments this evening.
All right, Jim Cutter, 86 Pond Street here in the city. And my subject is 86 Pond Street, driveway especially, etc. Dear Alderman Cookson, on October 18th, 1887, John Lund sold a strip of land on Palm Street to Caleb Richardson. It measured more or less 150 feet long. The actual length was 153 feet, including a 3-foot wide gap on the north side of 86 Palm Street deed. When the builder built our home, he knew there was a gap in our deed. To help remove the gap, he added a closed-in porch with a door on the north side, causing continual and uninterrupted use during the statute of limitation period of 20 years for land ownership. The DeRosa family lived at 86 Pond Street from 1942 to 1972, to be the family that removed the gap in 1962, before the Gilbertsons arrived. That gap, like all gaps, must be at the end of the last dimension of the deed. When the Gilbertsons arrived in 1968, the city building inspector had approved a permit in 1950. Then, when their permit was approved in 1971, it convinced them there was a gap at 86 Palm Street. See RSA 627:3, effect of ignorance or mistake, and that, as you read it, will put the blame on the city for not correcting it. The 86 Pond Street property was willed in 1972, and since probate court takes about a year, there was plenty of time for the Gilbertsons to install an illegal fence in our driveway on the vacant lot of land. When we came to Nashua in 1977, there was nothing to make us suspicious about our deed and land between the fence and property line. It was when our children got their driver's license that we wondered about the tightness of our driveway. Our property was surveyed in 1988. It is 2 feet 9 inches from the property mark. House is 20 feet wide, and driveway is 10 feet 3 inches wide, to total 33 feet. The fence took a third of our driveway / curtilage, in violation of RSA 31:102, obstructing access to highways, and RSA 627:9(1), curtilage. We feel our problem can easily be resolved, and we will not need to sue the city if the Gilbertsons leave our property. Sincerely. The addendum that I have attached to this letter, the above letter explains why we have a very narrow driveway in one of the smallest lots in Nashua. And it is hard to understand why the legal department thinks they need to ignore the city mistakes that have allowed the Gilbertsons to use our property. We do not want the city to ignore their mistakes because it may cost us money to have it corrected. And why should we, since we are victims of the city's errors? The legal department has been giving improper advice to keep us from presenting our case before the full Board of Aldermen, when our problem is a simple case of criminal trespass. Also attached is the deed for the Gilbertsons. The Platts ordinance that was passed in 1949 that says that the plat should be accurate, and the building permit that Gilbertson signed after the original one for his property was 1950. Gilbertson's was 1971, 21 years later. Today, there's no such a thing happening. It's only 1 year. After 1 year, they have to go down to get it updated. And I have the statutes obstructing access to highways, which says that there cannot be anything in the driveway to obstruct the passage, which definitely a fence does. And it says any officer with police power or selectman is hereby authorized, if in his opinion the same is necessary, to employ a wrecker or other apparatus to remove such obstruction at the expense of the owner or operator of said obstructing vehicle or object and the owner or operator of the wrecker or apparatus used and such. The statue is there, but if you take the fence down, I don't know what they can do with other than use it for firewood. Also, I've got a copy of the effect of ignorance or mistake, which points out that, we have here the law contained in a statute or other enactment or administrative order or grant of permission or a judicial decision of state or federal court or a written interpretation of the law referring to the offense officially made by a public servant, agency, and body legally empowered with authority to administer or enforce or interpret such law. So there we have that. And of course, curtilage, you're not supposed to do anything to curtilage. That's an untouchable. I've spoken to Jim Gilbertson about going down here to City Hall to see what they have on record, and he refuses. He happens to be a friend of Alderman Lopez, and Lopez, I would think, could talk to Jim Gilbertson to show the error of his ways. But it's strictly, like I say, here in the addendum, one of criminal trespass. So I would like to have this go before the board, and I'm sure that the full Board of Aldermen would determine that if it's a criminal trespass thing, then that fence should be removed, and we then have our property. As it stands now, it's been too long, and I'd appreciate your help. Thank you for listening.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Cutter.
I would hope it would be at the next Aldermanic meeting that this would come up and we can get it squared away. And
Mr. Cutter, would you mind if I asked you a couple questions?
sure can.
Thank you. You had your property surveyed in 1988.
Yes, it did.
When it was surveyed in 1988, you make the statement within your correspondence that it is, the property was surveyed in 1988 is 2 feet 9 inches from the property mark. Can you explain that to me? What is 2?
Yes. As I start off, I say the land when it was sold measured more or less 150 feet long. When you see a deed and it says more or less so many feet, that usually means around 3 feet. There's another thing that's used, it says about.
Mm-hmm.
About is usually a foot or less. And if you look at the deed I have here, Gilbertson, he's got about in his thing.
Do you have the property markers, or do you know where the property
They've
markers are?
been, what happened is over the years, a fence has been placed at that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, on the other side of me, the north side where you're asking about that, there's supposed to be a chisel mark. And when they did the street over for the Broad Street Parkway, they put a new thing. I've gone to the Board of Public Works about getting the chisel mark back in there, but nothing's happened, so I have to make another visit.
So
But
there are no
that 2 feet, 9 inches,
Yes.
if you take that, that is, right now, we've got a chain link fence there, right at the marker, where it should be. All right, 2 feet 9 inches, the house is 20, the driveway is 10 feet 3 inches. So if you add them all together, you get to 33.
Mhm.
See? And like I say, when the builder built our house, he knew there was a gap there. And as a matter of fact, I haven't done anything as far as the assessor's office is concerned. And it should have been changed back in 1962 when the DeRoches had lived there 20 years. That should have been taken care of. But because everybody knew everybody, they probably said to themselves, oh, why should we do it? Everybody knows this is our property. As a matter of fact, I've shown a photo of our driveway with a sailor.
Yep.
All right, and that proves that it's 10 feet. Not exact inches, because as a photograph, you'd have to be right up there to measure it, but that's how it is. Does that answer your question about the 2 feet
Yeah,
9?
Just one follow-up. You do not have any physical markers identifying the boundaries of your property? You identified,
The survey points it out. I think it's number 42 or something like that.
okay,
When they do the survey, they put down, they number them. They number them. And as a matter of fact, the surveyor that did it,
Back in
the
1988?
gap
In 1988,
between-
Mr. Cutter? In 1988, the surveyor who did it? That's what you're speaking of right now. In 1988, the surveyor.
yeah,
Okay.
when he did that, his crew did it, let me put it that way. Instead of putting the gap where it's supposed to be, at the north end of our property, he put it where Gillis's property meets ours. So the survey I had done has that error in it. I complained to the surveyor about it, and he kicked me out of the office. Happens to be one of these things, well, I'm right, you're wrong, you can't tell me, that type of person. You've met that person in your travels. And so I can't go back to him or anything like that. I can go to another surveyor, he said, you know. But anyway, that's
So
what
the
happened.
surveyor who did your property in 1988 has the gap that you're questioning on the north side of the property versus the south side of the property.
Yes, if you follow the deed's route, the deed for our property starts on Palm Street, goes easterly 70 feet, it goes southerly 30 feet because it hadn't been changed, and then it goes westerly 70 feet. And there is where it meets, it's along Gilbertson's property,
All right.
okay? Gilbertson's property goes the other way. He starts at the south corner of our property, and it goes south to Buck Street. It goes 60-something feet to the east, and it comes to what used to be Jellison's Well, which was where 23 Buck Street and was. Now it's no longer. Okay, it goes 23 feet north, and then 8 feet east again, and then 27 feet north. And then after it gets there to, at that point, it then goes westerly. Is it 50-something, 50, 60? Could be 70, come to think of it. But that should answer your question on the 2 feet 9
So
inches.
I noticed something as you were speaking to us just now, Mr. Cutter. You weren't referencing any numbers on a sheet of paper. You have got these dimensions and directions memorized. Is that correct?
I got most of it memorized, yeah. I've
And,
done it long enough.
and so tell me, you seem very much in command of the materials, the directions, the feet, et cetera, et cetera. How did you become so versed in this? What is it about your history that allows you to have that recollection, that immediate recall of specific numbers, figures, dimensions? Is there anything about your history that would speak to that?
The closest thing, I think, to that probably is when I was in the Air Force, they made me an auditor. Every day, the clerks from each unit would have to bring a report in to me. And I had to make sure when they made out that report that they didn't have any more than 3 errors. And some people were very good and others were not.
So you,
Oh, there was one there that he never made an error. And he got to be a challenge to me.
you have a,
Never.
ve- you
And
have an,
then I inquired about him. He had he had tried to be a pilot, and he didn't make it. He had graduated from the University of Notre Dame after 5 years of engineering. So I said, no wonder. So anyway, it's,
thank you
I
for
want to
that.
be sure of myself when I present anything here before you or anybody, because that's what it's all about.
Thank you, Mr. Cutter.
All
Yeah,
right.
I can tell you've got an attention to detail, and you've presented yourself very well each and every time that you've come before this committee for several years. And so I'm empathetic to your concern. I know that we've received guidance to tell you that this is a civil dispute and that you need to take this before the court system to accommodate or to alleviate any repercussions against your property that there may be. And so I'm not certain what action we can possibly take, but what I will commit to you again this evening is that I will speak to city staff and I will get for you in a communication in writing that says this is what the city is committed to, this is what they can do, this is what they can't do, and this is what we suggest you do moving forward.
All right. Now, let me comment on that.
Certainly.
I have on my addendum, we do not want the city to ignore their mistakes because it may cost us money to have it corrected. Okay? There happens to be in the city charter, I think it's number 45, and it states that the mayor can enforce an ordinance. Our present mayor, even the one before him, refused to do it. That city charter is what I go by, that our mayor can correct that, and when it's corrected, that's all we need. I have spoken to a police officer down at the station, and he said, well, we can't do anything unless we get a letter from the city, and then we can go ahead and do it. After all this opposition that I've been receiving, I have an idea. I'd be better off if I just go to the chief and say, hey, chief, look at the order, the city's not doing what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to follow the city charter. That the city charter is the voice of the people. You know that.
Certainly.
And so there was no sense of going to, I went down to city, see about that. It's going to cost me $160 to take out the paperwork for that. Why should we have to do that when it is, of all people, it should be Gilbertson that has a fight with the city? But because of the effect it's having on us, I'm coming here and before you, and I believe that the city charter should be followed. There's no sense to going down and spending $160 in Superior Court for something that the mayor can take care of. I mean, it'll only take him, what, 10 minutes or so? Or he's gonna dictate it to the secretary. The secretary's gonna write it up, he's gonna type it, that's all. And then the cost of a letter to Gibbelson to get there. Or even, my own alderman here, Lopez, could speak to Gibbelson. Although I know Gibbelson can talk the birds out of the trees, he's that good, even though, you know, he could use some more education. But anyway, between Alderman Cook, Lopez, or a letter from the city hall, one of the two should be effective. At least the mayor would be very effective if he doesn't want to be bothered. Okay?
Certainly
I think
appreciate
that's the way it should be.
we appreciate your perspective this evening, Mr. Cutter. Thank you for coming again and
All right,
speaking to us.
very good.
Alderman Shoneman,
Can I ask a question of Mr. Cutter, please?
certainly.
Mr. Cutter, I'm looking at the attachment,
Yes,
and on the left-hand panel here, this is the deed
right,
for the Gilbertsons.
yes,
And that deed, under subparagraph 1, describing the property, it says southerly,
yes,
by said Palm Street, about 51 feet. So that's 51, give or take, less than a foot.
yes,
51 feet to Buck Street.
yes,
And then the rightmost panel, this is the building permit
right,
that was issued in 1950
right,
that the Gilbertsons relied upon for their addition whenever they did it.
right,
And that dimension is shown here as being 52.57 feet.
correct.
And that difference between 51 and 52, that's the difference we're talking about?
Yes, the story is from what I can gather, going over this whole thing, is you notice on the building permit, under Jim Gilberson's name is Genevieve Karen. Well, it was her husband Leo who took out this original one on May 12th, 1950. Okay. He, at the time, that was before, let's see, yes, that was before the DeRosiers had put in the 30 years. And so he felt, although it was 1950 and the law had been passed in 1949, like 5 to 6 months before, he thought he could get away with it, so he went down and he took out the permit, and he got it approved. And it should never have been. Like I say, he got away with it, and nothing happened. And then, of course, he passed away, and Genevieve was left with the property, and she just didn't. Well, she was giving up the store. There was Leo's store that was there, and so anyway, she, I believe. I don't know, I'm just guessing. She said to Gilbertson, oh, there's a gap here, you can get some more land. I think she pulled that on. I don't know, I'm just guessing.
But it sounds like, if I may continue,
Alderman Shoneman.
that the building permit was issued with dimensions that are contrary to the deed.
Oh, yes, because the Gilbertsons thought that gap was still in effect. It had not been removed. That's what that difference is. My deed hasn't been changed either. So if you look at my deed, it shows that my property is 30 feet. And whenever I get rid of my property, I'm gonna make sure that, the new deed is written up correctly to be 33. It's supposed to be the 2 rods. And, so that would stop this from ever happening again. And, I can't imagine it happening again, but, it would stop it.
May I ask
I
just
don't know
one
if
more
there's
question?
anything else there that I can point out.
What is the basis for the DeRochers to have claimed the gap in their property?
Well, that's
Usage?
because, as I point out here, the builder built our home, when he built it, he knew there was a gap in our deed. They knew it was a gap right off the bat, even though John Lund sold the property to Caleb Richardson. They knew at the time, the natives there, knew that there was a gap. And he was just too lazy to go out and get a surveyor to, have it surveyed. And so anyway, he knew there was a gap. And this is something that is very helpful. To help remove the gap, he added a closed-in porch with a door on the north side, causing continual and uninterrupted use. That way then, the coming and going, they had to cross over that gap. And after you do it for 20 years, it becomes yours.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Cutter.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate any questions. It's very helpful as far as I'm concerned. But to repeat myself, there's no need of anybody besides our mayor. Our mayor has it in the charter, and anything you write to me, that'll be my response. That the mayor's, like I say, all he has to do is dictate what he wants done, and that is to enforce the ordinance. It wasn't enforced, and that will take care of it, and everything will be fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Cutter. Like I indicated, I'll speak to city staff, and we'll get a communication back out to you, letting you know what the city will or will not do, and then so you can take appropriate action on your own behalf.
Well, I'll probably be coming back to you.
You are more than welcome to, any time. You're a pleasure to have.
Well, same here. I like, as a matter of fact, there's nobody on the board. I appreciate all the aldermen. And I may disagree with what they might say or whatever, but I like everybody. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Cutter.
Okay, thank you very much.
We will
for
accept your
time.
communication in just a moment.
Okay,
All right?
excuse me?
You may go ahead and take your seat
Oh,
back in
yes,
the
yes.
chamber, and we'll continue on.
All right, fine, thank you.
Director Marchant, would you like to join us now for the presentation? Thank you. We're going to have a presentation on the Downtown Riverfront Development Plan. You certainly may, and
All right, good evening. Let's
Good
see if
evening.
I can get this up here real quick. Thank you guys for having me. I have a very short presentation. I think it's less than 10 slides. So I'll run through it. If you have any questions, let me know. Stop me at any time. So the mayor has an initiative, and I think I was here in maybe last November. I sent a communication that the city was going out for a consultant to look at the downtown riverfront. And the focus is to reactivate and to make sure that we can interact with and see the river that passes right through the heart of our city. So the city selected Halverson Design Partnership to be our main consultants out of Boston, and they have Horsley Wittengroot as their environmental consultants. So we've created a downtown riverfront plan, master planning process. And I'm just going to go through that real quick with you. So the project area you can see on this map is pretty concentrated in the main downtown along the riverfront. So it goes from the Mill Yard, which includes the canal on the on the western side, and then there we go. See if that helps a little bit with the mouse, sorry. Mr. Spelios' property, this is the Mill Yard Technology Park to orient you. And this is the new Broad Street Parkway Bridge. Here is Cotton Mill and Clock Tower Place, the Greeley House, Renaissance Park, Main Street Bridge, our existing river walk here, the cantilever bridge that goes to Margaritas, the library's here, and then the study area goes all the way down to the bridge right behind BAE. So this is our main focus area, and it's really the heart of downtown and the river in this area. And the goal is to, it's a very condensed, pretty outreach intensive process, and the goal is to talk to as many people as possible, get some good ideas from the community, and then look to clearly identify those ideas with designs, go back to the community with the designs, say, is this what you were thinking? Is this what you're looking for in these areas? And come up with a clear, concise master plan by middle of July that has basically a list of projects, their basic cost estimates, and some prioritization associated with it. So what we were able to do, and to hopefully to working out pretty effectively so far to get a ton of outreach, is actually to start to use a website that the city has hosted that is highly interactive, unlike this mouse at the moment. And I'm just going to bring it up here, which is Co-Urbanize Nashua. You can get to it from our website. This is what it looks like. I'm going to bring it up and show you. Oh, man. It's so close, but so far. There we go. All right, so here is the website, and it's a pretty cool interactive map, and all of these dots are what's great, what's missing, or could be better. And so through looking at a lot of the downtown master plans, interaction with different levels of staff and different community groups, we started populating this map with what are the things that people love about Nashua, what do we love about our riverfront, what's missing. And from there, we've had actually a ton of community feedback and outreach on this, where people are adding in their own comments. And then the beauty of it is people add in a comment about what they think is great, what's missing, what could be better, and other people are then piggybacking off of that and commenting and saying, well, I'd like this, I don't like this. And so we're getting a lot of good interactive dialogue, and we're getting a lot of feedback that's able to be clearly and concisely managed for this short feedback time period. So we had a kickoff meeting almost 2 weeks ago tonight upstairs in the auditorium. We're coming to you to get some feedback and ideas, and to encourage you to please put them on this website so we don't have to data input them ourselves, and to help spread the words about this. We've been in touch with either have been or have meetings set up to talk to every property owner that directly abuts the river. We've talked with quite a few different downtown agencies and groups. We've had a lot of feedback from the Civic Sounding Board, and so we have a pretty good outreach campaign, talking to the Chamber and Rotaries and looking to really get out there and get the word out on this. And so the goal of this, again, is in just a couple weeks to have a clear, concise plan of how we want to activate the riverfront. So just to show you a little bit more of where we're going with this, beyond the website, all of this information is available on the website too, under the info pad. So we're breaking down the downtown into 4 quads. And so here's the Mill Yard quad, and you can see we bring these big boards and panels with us. All of these are ideas for activating the riverfront. You can see some of the main ideas, things we're looking at in this area are connecting Mine Falls Park to the downtown. Here's the Cotton Transfer Bridge and the existing Riverwalk, and it's very close, or people who are parking here, and nobody knows that you can, very few people know you can get to Mine Falls Park there. So how can we better make that connection? How can we ensure that people who are working downtown have access to this? And so there's the first quadrant in the mill yard. Working with Mr. Spelios, Saturday morning we had the opening of his boat launch. It was a little bit rainy, but beautiful opening, beautiful facility he's built down there that's now open to the public. And those are the kind of things that we're looking to do more of and enhance with this downtown riverfront development plan. So there's some parts from the first quadrant. The second quadrant is more of this main core downtown. With Brady Sullivan's development, redevelopment of the mill building at, on 34 Franklin Street, there's quite a bit of discussion about the Greeley House, what's going on with that property, which they also own. Is it green space? Is it parking? What is it that the community feels is best in that area? And so we're trying to activate that conversation now as they're getting into this. And certainly along Clock Tower, there's a lot of people who use this walking trail from Cotton Mill over to Clock Tower, but along the back side of Clock Tower, it's kind of like it's their driveway, right? It's not that well, it's Mill Yard's driveway. It has potholes. It's not that well lit. A lot of people don't like walking on that back place. So how can we enhance that walkway to make sure that people can be there and interact with the river as a whole? And the connection of the French Park. It was always intended to do the cantilevered bridge that goes like from Peddler's Daughter down to Margaritas on all four sides of Main Street Bridge. So the owner of 4 Water Street, Mr. Serrato, is very much on board and would love to see the connection from Bicentennial Park around his building to the French Park. We have lots and lots of new events, cultural, the farmers market, all kinds of music and artist events down at Bicentennial at French Park. How can we better engage that with the river and with Bicentennial? How can we connect them to the Main Street Bridge in downtown? So those are the kind of things that people are suggesting and that we're exploring through this process. Yep.
I'd be remiss if I didn't make a comment now with regard to an issue that former Alderman Presley would quite frequently bring up, and that is the vegetation along the river. Is that one of the submissions that you would like to have
Yes.
contributed?
Specifically on the backside of Clock Tower and
Yes.
concerns about that? Yes, absolutely. And
right.
I think in talking with her, she's also has always for a very long time been concerned about adding some fencing that is maybe period appropriate when they clean up the vegetation to have some beautiful fencing so you're still protected from the edge of the river, but that you can actually see it and interact with it because it grows in so much this time of year. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Alderman.
Alderman Lopez?
I remember last year we had talked about doing an engineering study for the Cantilever Bridge, and the Board of Aldermen hadn't really approved it because it would have been expensive at a time where we didn't have a lot of extra money to spend. And it seems like the idea is continually being brought up. On the public outreach page, for example, the city of Nashua posted that as an item, and it had 4 supporters on it. But I saw a lot of other points of interest on there as well. Are the other ideas being given equal weight? Because I think it could be easy to say, oh, well, you're looking to connect Mine Falls with downtown. What about a cantilevered bridge? And start directing the ideas of public input that are authentic towards that existing priority. But how are we making sure that when the public is saying we actually want something different, we're making sure that we're hearing the public and we're giving it the same weight that it deserves?
So every comment's being considered and will be part of this plan. Absolutely. The thought was the necessity is that if we just left a blank map up there, nobody's going to give any input. And both the website and consultants said you need to populate it with some things. And there's many things that the design of those 3 remaining cantilever bridges is in the CIP. We are constantly looking for grant funding for those things. And you're absolutely right. It's a very expensive project. And it's something that's why we look for grant funding for. But all of these projects are being, and ideas are being, or will be considered and weighed as part of this planning process. Absolutely.
Alderman Lopez?
I just want to make sure that the public input, when you get the public's attention and you build the enthusiasm and excitement around this kind of a development project, there is something of a responsibility to make sure that you don't just make them feel like they were being used. And I'm not saying you specifically, I'm saying in general. When you bring the public in on this, you have to follow their input because otherwise you're demonstrating to them that their input is just something to be used. And I know we had another riverfront project a couple years ago where a lot of really interesting and engaging ideas were proposed for it, but ultimately the developers didn't include any of those ideas. So with the city taking a stronger role here, I would just want to be extra cautious about answering to the citizens and making sure that their ideas are really being given voice, because I wouldn't want somebody to take this as their opportunity to get more involved in the city, invest themselves in something that they care about downtown, and then feel discouraged because it went a different direction.
I can say that I can't promise that everything's going to be done. I mean, funds are still limited, but the point of this being a hard-hitting outreach and a quick turnaround to be done in July is because the mayor has every intention of moving projects forward. So I can definitely say that, and that everybody's projects will be considered.
Alderman Lopez.
Is there any specific deadline for the bridges that's relevant to July, or is that just a project that's kind of open-ended in nature?
It's just a project that's open-ended, no.
Okay, just curious.
Alderman Dowd.
A couple of quick questions. One, when all of the inputs are in and the plan is formulated, are you gonna do it, say, okay, this is the priority phasing, so things get phased in as funding becomes available? And the other question I have is, has the city had any conversations with BAE about
Yes.
that area of the project? Because I'm sure that they would probably have some input. And the last question is, we did a lot citywide to improve the banks from the bridge east, but from the bridge over the Main Street Bridge to the other side of the Broad Street Bridge, along the shore, I noticed when we were building the Broad Street Parkway there's a lot of junk. And, you know, should start just getting rid of the junk and the trees that are down and all that to make it look better.
Let's see, I don't know, I remember your first question now. Second question on BAE, yes. We actually have a meeting with them coming up in a couple weeks. I've had conversations with them over the past couple years, and you can see here one of their main concerns and things that they are very interested in talking with us further about is a walkway that connects the railroad bridge, which is currently used by pedestrians, not through the middle of their parking lot, but along the edge to get to the cantilevered bridge, and also has a safe, nice walkway for their staff and for people there to, I mean, how many, 3,000 people are working there when they want to walk to lunch downtown or to walk to the shops downtown, rather than there's a paved, striped walkway, which you can kind of see through the end of their parking lot. I'm not even going to try with a mouse, that they've just painted on to the parking lot. And that's not their idea of what they'd like to provide, and they're very much interested in talking to the city about how we can do better with that piece of the walkway along the edge of that property.
So as a former employee and having my office in that building, and I'm no longer employed there, I'd be willing to assist if you want to.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you.
To be a liaison between the two, knowing what they probably want. And
So yes, like I said, we are engaging with all the property owners, and we do think that's a really important part of it. And what do they need? What are they most interested in for their employees? I mean, how can we better serve them as well? Had a great conversation with TCU and many of their top executives, and we'll be talking to their staff. So there's a lot of different businesses and groups in this area that we're interacting with, because these are the people who are downtown and on our main street every day anyways.
Alderman Lopez.
With regard to the path through the parking lot, I run there, I'm supposed to run there every morning so that I'm, as part of my running route. And I don't understand the logic when it was originally made of just painting it directly through the middle of the lot. I always got the impression that it was following some kind of route, because it would have made sense when they first connected the footbridge to the river walk to paint that along the perimeter. It seems like it's following some other route. So I guess my two questions are, number one, are you aware of any particular reason they decided to just paint a line right through the middle of a parking lot? Because I'm very much a stickler for detail, so I follow that thing every morning, even though it's just paint on the ground and there's no good reason to do it. But I was wondering why it's like that. And then the second part was, wouldn't it just be a matter of painting it around the perimeter?
I don't know definitively. Through some conversations I've had, they have a problem with vandalism, and they felt that a walkway in the middle of the lot would have more eyes on it than one along the edge, and also for snow removal issues. So I think that in talking to them about a walkway on the edge, it would be something that they would like to see divided with a fence or some kind of a barrier to keep people out of the parking lot and away from the cars that are parked there, and also to provide a much better walking experience in general.
Alderman Lopez.
Would like a cantilevered pathway be kind of what we were looking for?
I don't think it would need to go that far. I think
Okay,
there's
just
plenty of
checking.
land, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I do know they're very, very sensitive to parking.
Alderman Dowd, can I ask you to speak into the microphone, please? Thank you.
They're very sensitive to parking because that building is totally full and the big parking lot is totally full. So parking is an issue to the point where they have leased a number of other buildings in the city now to expand. So they would be, I would assume, be more than willing to give up some area of parking for some exchange of other parking, but that's something that have to be worked out.
I think on the south side of the river, the library walk, that area is pretty densely vegetated, especially in the summer with a full canopy. And that's an area that many people would like to see much safer, well lit, so they feel like they could use it. It's actually an amazing loop that you could do around the city and get into Mine Falls Park. You could get almost to 3 miles with a quick, easy loop. And with the new pedestrian bridge over the canal, Mine Falls Park connecting it to the Heritage Rail Trail, you could do some pretty amazing runs around downtown or walks at lunch. But we need to make some of these, what we're hearing is some of these spaces just don't feel safe and comfortable, even in broad daylight. So those are some of the things that we're hearing that we could do. Projects, lighting, trimming of vegetation, cleaning things up. And the last quad is at the very end. We really don't want to lose sight of connecting the downtown Riverwalk and the river, which is very close, less than 1/8 of a mile to the future rail station at 25 Crown Street. So certainly looking at the connections along some of the streets here. And I think very interestingly, there's this other oxbow here that kind of matches the Milliard Technology Park, this vacant land there, that connecting that down towards the Merrimack River and looking at some of that land in the future for more green space and passive activity along the waterfront would be very cool. So I think that's pretty much all I have. If you have more questions or comments?
I've got some, but Alderman Lopez, let's start with you.
I'm just curious about the library walk area because it has been coming up more lately, and it does need some attention. When we did a cleanup last year, there was a lot of debris that we removed that had basically built up over the years. And I mean, I was picking it up and looking at it, and a lot of it dated back like 10, 15 years. But when we did the follow-up cleanup, there wasn't anywhere near as much. I saw something on the sounding board about how there was like children were reporting that they were wading through the needles everywhere, and it was just terrible. But when they did the cleanup this past weekend, I think they found 2 across all of the areas that were cleaned up. So there is an issue of public perception. But the physical reality of the space is, you know, in the afternoon, it's a wooded area. It's secluded from the busier part of the city life. That might be intimidating to some people, but for a lot of people coming in from the library, going on a pleasant walk and using it every day, it's very attractive. I know a lot of the people in that neighborhood use it as a shortcut as well. So while the people who aren't immediately in that area may be eyeing it with a little distrust, and there are certainly some lighting issues at work, the area itself is pretty pleasant. So with the plan for development, are we looking at more at an economic kind of a development? Like first we trim the trees back, then maybe we see if people want to start utilizing it for more commercial uses? Or are we looking at retaining that as a nature recreation area similar to Mine Falls?
I can't answer that. The feedback that we've gotten so far seems more like trimming back the trees and just making it a little bit more open, that people do value the idea of it being a more rural space in the middle of the city. But we'll see at the end what the final results are.
Well, if it's fair use, I'll go on Co-Urbanize later and suggest that we actually improve that as a trailhead, because the abandoned knife shop alone is a little bit like oh good, we're walking over by an abandoned knife shop. But if you put lights there and it would became more generally known that that's accessing a nature trail, I think there'd be a lot more positive space use.
I think that's a great comment.
Alderman Dowd.
You know, one of the perceived unsafe areas at one point in time was between Peddlers and Margaritas. And your predecessor had some activities to clean that up to the point where I know tons of people from BAE walk down there to go to lunch. They feel totally safe. I don't know how we funded that, but if we could do that on further down and on the other side, I'm sure you get a lot of walking activity.
Any other questions or comments for Director Marchant?
Oh.
Alderman Lopez.
Just to follow up to Alderman Dowd, I would suggest checking before spending any money on it because, again, we did a pretty sizable cleanup at the beginning of last year, but there was not that much built up afterwards. So I don't think it's exactly I think the perception of it is considerably different from the reality.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Schoenman.
Thank you. Perception is important, though, and I think that the reality is whatever it is, but if we want people to be down there and using it and feeling safe, I think that's important. Lighting could be a good thing. We'll certainly look forward to seeing what we're going to do. I think Alderman Dowd's point about cleaning up some of the brush along the river on the west side of the Main Street Bridge, there's been talk about that for a long time. It's quite overgrown. It looks unkempt. One of the things that I think was discussed in the presentation that we've talked about is when this is all said and done, whatever is said and done, there has to be some kind of funding for maintenance so that it stays looking good. It's nice that volunteers come in and clean up, but hopefully that should be a minimal requirement so that it's kept nice. So what are the plans for maintenance?
That's a great question. I think part of the value of this plan on the other side is that as development comes in along these areas, that we can say, this is the city's vision, this is what is expected, and we need to help you, we need you as a partner in this and helping us maintain. That is exactly what the city did with Cotton Mill and the piece that they maintain. And that was the nicest piece last summer, right? Because they maintained it. So I think having a plan that shows where we want to go and what we're doing to help bring on development partners to help maintain it is huge. I do think that the mayor, working with Tim in economic development and others, are looking at the TIF mechanism again for this area, because the beauty of a TIF is it does have the ability to provide long-term maintenance along with funding for some of these projects. The reason why the cantilevered bridge between Peddlers and Margaritas is maintained and the landscaping around it is because it's paid for out of the TIF in that small area. And so that's why that area is upkept. So it is, maintenance is something that we do struggle with funding. And I think it's a very good point, absolutely. And something we're thinking about.
Director Marchant, could we get an update on that TIF and how well it's performing or how efficient it is in its performance? I know that at one point in time there were issues about having it just wasn't, there weren't enough owners or renters within that particular development, and I'm not sure what the current situation is.
I'd be happy to provide that
Thank you.
information. Yes, it is solvent and doing just fine at this moment
Great.
overall, but I'd be happy to provide full details.
Any other questions? All right, my turn.
Okay.
Co-urbanize.
Yes.
Tell me about the website. Where did it come from? How did it, because it's not, is it an application that we're purchasing or paying for?
We're paying a monthly fee, a small amount, for 4 months for this project. We own all the data at the other side of it. At any point, we could go back to them and do something else with it, but it is a very low-cost website that I think we were able to work with them and get the site up in under a week and a half. Which it met our timeline. They have been incredibly adaptive and easy to work with, and we're getting a lot of really good feedback. So, so far we've been very impressed with the site and their ability to turn it around.
Is it a local company?
It's out of Boston.
Okay.
Yep.
How many participants have we had on the site? How many people have contributed to the site?
I checked, last week it was over 100, but I have not checked recently. I can certainly find out.
And of those individuals, they may have contributed more than one idea or reacted or responded to one idea. So is the number 100 or thereabouts, that number, does that represent an individual or does that represent the total number of contributions to the site?
That would be unique logins.
Unique.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
All right. And I took the opportunity to read through. I'm not sure if I clicked on every single pin,
That would be a
but I
lot.
attempted to.
Okay.
Is there an easier way to aggregate the information?
Yes. So there's a couple ways. So you can, up here on the top, let's see if I can get there. There's the info page, which has all those maps I just showed you. There's a ton of maps here. There's infrastructure maps. There's environmental maps as well. There's a lot of great information there. But at the end here under comments, you can add just a comment that is not location specific, but you can also sort them and you can see comments. Not all of them are clearly on the first page. So you can see a lot of comments here. And I do think that people have uniquely logged in and not necessarily left a comment too.
But you as an administrator have the ability to pull down
Yes,
and drop it into a spreadsheet and do
exactly.
an analysis on it.
And actually, that's one of the reasons why we went with them, because it's a very nice, concise form of data. And so what we're doing right now is this: what's great, what's good. Once we get the visualizations from Halverson, we'll be putting those visualizations up. In addition, Halverson did a drone flight of the river, and they can put visualizations into the drone flight. So we'll have all of that up here. There'll be videos you can see, there'll be visualizations, and then we'll be changing the categories, to make sure that we're getting the right feedback. Is this what people wanted? Is this what we want to see? Now we don't like this idea, we love this idea. So all of that data will be categorized.
Now,
and
is
accessible.
Halverson going to do the analysis?
Yes,
Okay. So no city staff at this point in time will be contributing time or effort in the analysis?
no, that's not, yeah, they will be working with us to
Okay.
do that, absolutely. They won't be doing it on their own, no,
Okay.
yes.
All right. One of the other things, we're a community of over 86,000, residents, right?
Mhm.
And we've got 100 ideas. And not to, and I think some of the ideas are really good. I like a lot of them. But how do you balance, Alderman Lopez was going along the perspective of, if somebody's going to contribute some thought, some critical thinking skills to this and submit an idea, and then their idea is not used, I'm looking at it from a larger perspective, and that is, we're a community of over 86,000 people. Many of those people, not all 86,000, but, some of them, some portion, visit downtown. So how do we get the broader, how do you go from these ideas to getting a much larger buy-in from a community or a city of
86,000.
Nashua? Yes.
Yeah, I think that it's a monumental task to do that, and we have a short time frame. That's why we're looking at a lot of the community groups. We will have all these boards up downtown and downstairs in the rotunda, hoping to get by the DMV area so that we get people who are coming in and out. All of these are up on government television for all
Right.
those watchers, and we are putting some slides up on government television about this so that people can go there and see it there. We are, talking to many of the groups in town, trying to outreach. If there's, we would appreciate any help from all of you sharing these ideas. I think that for a full-blown master planning effort, people take a year or two because they get
Right.
out and they see everybody. What we are hoping is that in those kind of processes, people get really burned out. And by the end, nobody even remembers what you were actually trying to do in the beginning anyways. So we're looking at this as a first as a first blush at redoing some of this master plan, and then to get to implementation, so that people do feel appreciated, that they feel like what they've contributed is being heard, and that we are moving forward with some of those actions anyways, and that we can't do all of them, I'm sure, and then to try and do it better.
So, and I'm not going to pick out any one particular suggestion, but Idea A gets a tremendous amount of support from the people who have gone on to co-urbanize and taken the time to submit their thoughts or ideas. Yes, I like Idea A. I would, amend Idea A by doing this instead, or, what about this, and, build off of that idea. But Idea A may have absolutely zero weight when it comes to what the citizens of Nashua want, or, so again,
Yeah.
it's a real balancing act, and I don't know where you take the leap from the ideas that are submitted and then get a larger collective to react or respond, or if it's just the people that you mentioned, the businesses that are around the downtown area, the riverfront, and get those individuals to buy in.
I mean, it's the individuals we're outreaching to. It's, the Nashua River Watershed Association. It's the Conservation Commission. It's the Planning Board. We're outreaching to as many people as we can and asking them to share. The Lower Merrimack River Advisory Council has been submitting comments. So if there are groups and ideas, we're asking them to pass it on. And certainly, all of these things and the culmination of this will come back to you as the Board of Aldermen about what our priorities are and what things we move forward and get funded with. So it's not perfect, but it is a really good try at trying to get a lot of information. And that's why it's also an iterative process. We have this, what do you want first? And then moving to the visualizations and trying to understand. Sometimes with visuals versus something like this, it's much easier for people to react, to say, I like that, I don't like that. And maybe we can get more from that. So we will be going back out to people and showing this information again at that time. And hopefully between those 2 rounds of iterations, we'll get quite a bit back.
So by this plan that you hope to have in July of 2017,
Correct.
how complete is that plan?
It's a pretty high-level plan.
Okay.
It's not an engineering plan at all.
No dollars associated to it?
There would be some general dollar estimates, but they are going to be ballpark estimates.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Alderman Shoneman?
Thanks. I just wanted to comment on the question you asked. How do we figure this out? How do you design something with input from really a relatively small portion of the population? And I think that in the end, we have to make sure that we have really good design, professional design. I think back to the process of Legacy Playground, all the different suggestions that were made by people who aren't necessarily designers. Maybe have some design interest, but in the end, a really great design was developed by a great designer, and then people could look at it and say, wow, that's really wonderful. And it embodied some of the things that they couldn't even put their own words to. Certainly that's the case with me. You can ask people, what art is, and they may or may not know or have a good description, but then they go to a museum and they say, that's it. And I think having all that input is good, and it's useful. We want to have buy-in. But we really need to have that process not necessarily be the design process. There has to be a truly professional designer who puts something together that in the end you can say, wow, I didn't know what I was looking for, but that's it. Because it embodies, city beautification that will draw people in. I think that should be the ultimate goal of this, is to increase the attractiveness, the aesthetic that we've talked about that Nashua needs to start drawing people in and get people downtown.
Great. Thank you, Alderman Shoneman.
Thank you.
Before I go to Alderman Dowd and then Lopez, one of the other things that I had thought about that I'd meant to share, and you had talked about the library, the path by the library, and then the comment was made about, how full it is right now, and that there's not a lot of natural light that penetrates, and so and then we talked about going there during lunchtime. One of the other things that we'd have to be concerned about in any of these paths, and I think I've brought it up in prior conversations. And I'm not sure if it's used up here very, very often on a university system or, but I've always, the university that I went to, there were, it was called the Blue Light Trail. And so I don't know if that has any weight or bearing or people would feel safer with that. And basically what it is it's a communication station. It's usually a pole with a blue light at the top. And it's literally, if you feel uneasy, in danger, somebody is, making you feel uncomfortable, you have the ability to place an immediate communication to police dispatch. And then no two posts are too far apart. You can always see that next blue light along your path. So it would lend to people feeling more safe and, possibly being able to utilize the trails at many hours besides just lunchtime. And it might be, a little bit later in the evening.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know if those conversations have been had or discussed or
I
contemplated.
think it's a great idea as part of this, and we can certainly note that, absolutely.
All right. Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, two quick things. Could we get some interest from the local media to put something in the paper with the website?
Yeah.
And people might then go and make a comment or at least look at it?
We did have front page coverage of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
You were on
probably have to have
vacation,
more than
Alderman Dowd.
once.
Yeah.
You were on vacation.
Oh, probably. And the other thing is, have we reached out to the Chamber of Commerce they have a pretty extensive network.
Yes, we'll be speaking with them at their May meeting. We also put it out through the Regional Planning Commission because in theory, we want the region to come downtown, right? And so we've put it out through their constant comment newsletters. And so absolutely, and if you have more ideas about groups we should reach out to, happy to have them because we are really looking to try and do that. Yep.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd. Alderman Lopez?
I just wanted to respond to Alderman Shoneman's observation. I think professional design should definitely be a given for any project that we begin to initiate. But to the comments I was making earlier, I think one of the difficulties that Legacy Playground particularly encountered was the location chosen to put it there. And I know initially they did start with what was presented as where does the community want to see this? Where do they think is the best? And I know LGN's probably watching me right now, but I don't think they actually listened to the input as well as they could have because the site that they attempted to pursue not only wasn't necessarily the only one presented, but it was certainly became a barrier because they didn't listen to public comment. So I would just caution that when we do development of this type, be very conscious that we are listening to what the public is actually saying, because sometimes if we're too focused on a specific objective, we can set ourselves up for contentiousness later on.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Very well said.
Just add one thing. So Halverson Design Associates is a design firm, and we're really hoping that some of their images, while these are not going to be engineering grade designs, will certainly inspire people to think about this and really think about what they want and how they could envision this area as differently.
Alderman Shoneman.
Thanks. Yeah, I think Alderman Lopez is right. Politics got involved in that situation, and agendas got involved and took over design. And in the end, the design that we got, I think, was finally a design that was a good design. And a lot of time and energy was spent running down different paths that really didn't do us any good. So I think knowing we have good design for the purpose of having good design, not for the purpose of a particular outcome, is good.
Thank you, Alderman Shoneman. Alderman Lopez.
I just wanted to add that process that happened was very discouraging to a lot of people who participated in it because they were truly passionate about what was being done, and because an element that wasn't 100% crucial to the actual design and intent that they were most passionate about took such a priority that it was a much more difficult and laborious process than it really needed to be. So I would, in my perfect world, I just like to see new development ideas proceed along the path of least resistance where the community wants it, so that's why we're doing it.
Well, I'm certain that we've learned from our previous mistakes, and then we won't repeat those for the downtown riverfront development plan. Thank you very much, Director Marchant, for coming this evening and sharing with us. We appreciate your time and look forward to more information as it becomes available.
Great. Do you want this back?
Certainly. All right, we can move on to communications. Let's go ahead and take up Mr. Cutter's communication first.
Sure.
And we'll,
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept a communication that was provided to us by Mr. Cutter tonight in connection with his testimony, and it was delivered tonight prior to the agenda being prepared. Just like to accept it and place it on file.
so we're going to, we have the rules to accept a communication from Mr. Cutter after the agenda was prepared. It's from James B. and Mary E. Cutter on April 26, 2017, addressed to Mark S. Cookson, Chair, Infrastructure Committee, Jim Donchis, Mayor, and Steve Bolton, Corporation Counsel. Is there discussion? Alderman Lopez.
I would have commented to this effect in my aldermanic comments, but during the public comment section, it was observed several times that I was friends with the Gilberts, and I was, that perhaps Mr. Gilbert could persuade me to believe one thing or the other. So I just wanted to clarify that the first day I became alderman, Mr. Cutter approached me with a letter asking me to certify as a public official that his land boundary was the appropriate dimensions, because he had found legislation that said if a city official asserted the dimensions of his property, then it was then enforceable. And I was really uncomfortable doing that. I didn't think that a legislative official should be doing anything with individuals' properties in that nature. So I took his information. I went to the Corporation Council, and I did a lot of in the community research, speaking to the neighbors, speaking to the Gilbertsons. I went and visited as many people as I could, as were home when I went. So that's the extent of my relationship with the Gilbertsons. Is I met them, I talked with them about their side of the story. They were pretty pleasant people. They were somewhat discouraged that their name keeps being brought up in public record in association with criminal trespass, which they don't believe that they're doing. When I spoke to Corporation Council, their position was that this is most likely a civil matter. The deeds go back 130 years. Both parties bought the properties as they were defined now. And so the direction that I've been giving consistently is let them pursue it as a civil matter if they need to. And so I've just have done my role as alderman in talking to the neighbors and finding out what's going on.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Just for future consideration, just make sure that your comments, and I'm happy to accept them this evening, just make sure that your comments are with regard to the motion. I understand your explanation and why you wanted to make that comment and make sure the rest of the committee understood and the public understood. I would just ask that refrain from those comments unless it's germane to the actual motion that's on the table.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
Great. Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that communication has been accepted and placed on file. Now we'll refer to the regular order of business, and we'll go with Attorney Leonard's communication. Do you want to?
Sure, I read it. We have a communication that comes from Cecilia K. Leonard, Office of the Corporation Counsel, regarding a petition for street acceptance, Northwest Boulevard Extension, and this was referred to our committee on 4/11.
All right. Discussion? Alderman Dowd.
I was talking to the mayor about several things, mostly budget today. And one of the things came up about this particular street acceptance, and it's, the mayor and Corporation Council had talked about this. This is just a a,
Housekeeping.
housekeeping, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was gonna say bookkeeping, housekeeping, activity, that the right-of-way is, or the street acceptance, the street's been being used for quite some time, that it already has been approved because of the rail, situation by whoever makes that approval. And it's just housekeeping and should just, move forward from this committee.
So just a little more background for the committee as well as members of the public who may be watching. This particular Northwest Boulevard extension was brought before infrastructure back in the 2000s. And it passed infrastructure. There was a public hearing with regard to accepting Northwest Boulevard extension. And the public hearing was had, and for whatever reason, between that public hearing and tonight, the Board of Aldermen never accepted Northwest Boulevard extension. To Alderman Dowd's point, it is a housekeeping issue. We've maintained the street. We know that the businesses that are on there, and they've been utilizing the street, and their Public Works has been maintaining. So I see it as a housekeeping issue as well. I know that there's at least one other person who may have another perspective, and I'd be willing to listen to that perspective if he would like to speak. Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, when I was reading the communication, it occurred to me that this basically took place, over 10 years ago. And, the public comment, the period for public comment, the public has a right to weigh in on these kind of things. The committee recommendation has a completely different composition. So I wasn't sure if we should at least have the public comment period, or the public hearing period again, just to, allow the public to have that kind of input. I guess I don't know what the consequences would be if we decided not to pass this. So I'm not sure whether it would be a productive use of time, though.
I appreciate the comments, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Dowd?
Yeah, it is on the agenda for tonight's meeting. If there were anybody that had any comments, they could have come in public comment. To have an actual public hearing, we could take acceptance, but the result's gonna be the same probably no matter what comments we get anyway. And to hold a public hearing where probably nobody's gonna show up because it's been that way for 16 years, or over 10 years, would probably not be a good use of our time.
I'm going to leave it to the will of the committee. I don't have an objection to conducting a public hearing if that's what the majority of the committee would like to do or suggest to do. The only requirement that we have is that it needs to be about 15 days out from this weekend would be the earliest that we could conduct a public hearing for this street. To Alderman Dowd's point, there may or may not be anybody who shows up, but anybody is always welcome, and I wouldn't want to restrict anybody from coming if somebody had something to say. But it's, at this point, it's the will of the committee. And so Alderman McGinnis.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think it's unnecessary.
Alderman Shoneman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I generally like the idea of public hearings. I think they're great and very important part of our process. But for all intents and purposes, the public hearing was done, and I know that was a long time ago, but it essentially passed, and it has been this way. So it would almost be as if we're considering taking away the public acceptance of this and reverting, because that's how we've been acting. We've been maintaining it, plowing it, and I presume all the things we normally do for regular streets. So in my opinion, I think we can do the housekeeping and pass
All
it,
right.
move it forward.
Alderman Lopez?
I think especially with the point Alderman Shoneman just made, that it doesn't seem like there's any point in having the public, an additional public hearing because it was had, any opportunity to speak was given, and I wouldn't want to derail that process either. For my purposes, I've just never seen anything like this before. I'm still pretty inexperienced as an alderman, so I wanted to at least have the discussion to find out what the other thoughts
Absolutely.
were.
Always happy to have the discussion. So in that instance, why don't we make a motion? Alderman McGinnis, did you make the motion to accept and place on file?
No, but I will to make sure, that this communication, make a motion that this communication from Celia Leonard be accepted and placed on file.
Very good. Any additional discussion on that motion? Alderman Lopez?
Just a question. Does this fall under unfinished business if it has been tabled?
We are going to take that up in another motion,
Okay.
just briefly. All right, so any additional discussion? All those in favor of accepting and placing on file, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that has been accepted and placed on file. I will go ahead and make the motion to remove from the table the petition for street acceptance for Northwest Boulevard Extension. Is there any discussion on that motion? I'll discuss. Apparently, even though it hasn't appeared on our agendas for the last 17 years, it actually has been tabled. And so therefore, we need to make a motion to remove it from the table so that we can take action on it and ultimately accept the street acceptance. So that's why my motion is to remove from the table. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that petition for street acceptance is now on the table. I will make a further motion to grant the petition for street acceptance for Northwest Boulevard Extension. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that motion has been accepted. Thank you. Unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
We have a resolution 17096, authorizing the acceptance of an easement from Girls Incorporated over land located at 27 Burke Street.
Is there a motion? Alderman Dowd.
Motion for recommend final passage to the full Board of Aldermen.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd. Discussion? Director Cummings, did you have anything to say with regard to, listen,
I was actually just coming to the petition in case any questions arose. I want to make sure you had directives.
so you don't have anything to say with regard to the acceptance of an easement for Girls Inc. on Burke Street? Nothing at all?
Well, good night.
Oh, Director Cummings, can you speak into the microphone so you can be,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. Again, for the record, Director Tim Cummings. And I was here tonight for the Northwestern Boulevard petition, so this other item was not within my portfolio.
thank you, Director Cummings.
Thank you.
Alderman Shoneman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the public's benefit, this is land that Girls Inc., I believe, used to rent, and they have now purchased it, but it's, there's always been an agreement on the parking lot that we would use it for the pool that's located there and for whatever other purposes we need. There's utilities running in and out on that land for the pool. So this is an easement that Girls Inc. is granting to the city, should we accept it, that will allow us to have public continue to park in that parking lot for use of the pool and so that we can access utilities that the pool requires. So it seems like it would be a good thing for us to do, and I think we should support it.
Thank you, Alderman Shoneman. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that motion carries. We will recommend final passage for Resolution 1796 to the full board. New business resolutions,
There is
sorry,
none.
ordinances.
Ordinances, there is none.
General discussion this evening, gentlemen. Alderman Dowd.
Just real quick, I know this isn't pertaining to this particular committee, but the budget process is now underway, and our first meeting is tomorrow night. short turnaround. So the Budget Committee should be prepared to listen to those particular committee or departments, and I'll be going forward with other budget hearings from now till into May.
So who's on your agenda for tomorrow evening, Alderman Dowd?
I know the airport's on it. Things change around so much. I don't have a copy with me, but it is on the website.
All right. Sorry, I
I
thought you
know
might.
that, I know the airport's on it, and I think the legislative assistant of ours is on it, and maybe the mayor's office, a lot of small ones.
Do you have it, Alderman
I
McInnes?
had it, and I think I left it on my desk at work, but
All right.
the airport is definitely on there.
Yes, the airport's definitely.
All
on.
right, sorry about that. Public comment. There is none. Additional remarks by Alderman. Somebody tell me why we have
Both. I
general
never knew.
discussion and then remarks by Alderman.
I don't know.
Particularly for committee
Supposed
meetings.
to be infrastructure related,
Okay.
and then remarks can be anything.
And I think remarks are not really back and forth.
So
Or germane
no
to the-
remarks by Alderman, no additional remarks by Alderman this evening? Possible non-public session, there is none. Is there a motion? Alderman Dowd.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Dowd is to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned at 8:34 PM. Thank you, gentlemen.